Welcome back to Conscious Conversations. Today, Reena Singh, the founder of Eka, is going to be talking to us about textiles, crafts, sustainability, and how to build a scalable, sustainable brand. Welcome, Reena, and
Thank you.
congratulations on building such a beautiful brand.
Thank you for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be talking to you this afternoon, Sachi.
How did you venture into the world of design? What are the influences that have shaped Eka?
So, design, I think, is something that is inherent. It's basically appreciating good things around you, or it is creating something that you don't see around, basically. I think I would have been a designer whether or not I trained to be one. I used to make clothes even when I was younger, when I wasn't qualified to be a designer. I used to still cut and sew. I used to paint a lot, I used to draw a lot, I used to write a lot of stories, which I still do really badly, but I still do. So I think I always had that creative space. Aligning it to make a future out of it and a living out of it is something that just happened to me. And I think I'm one of the few fortunate ones who've been able to convert something that you're so passionate about into a profession. So yeah, that's how it is.
As a brand, you've been at the forefront in the dialogue on sustainability much before it took center stage as it has today.
Yeah.
How did you interpret sustainability back then, and how has your relationship with the concept evolved over the years in both product and
Yeah.
process?
Like we were talking earlier, we spent a good part of the afternoon just talking to each other. See, the fact is that I was brought up in a family that lives with really very simple, quite ideology about life. Both my maternal and my paternal side of the family are into farming, agriculture. So the lifestyle is really simple. They consume whatever they grow locally. In the afternoons in summer, I remember we used to get these weavers from nearby villages who would come and sit in the courtyard, and we would have these sessions of them sitting and making dari at a stretch of like about 15 days. And it used to be like a celebration of some kind. They would be singing in the afternoon, and my nanny used to sit and do some kind of yarn ka thing and whatever. And she would also sometimes join in and make tassels with their wives. And so, you know, that environment was very normal for me to see, to be a part of while I was little. And then later on also a lot of things that we consumed in my household, like I can still, my mother still wears my nani's shawl, my father would still have something or the other from my grandfather. So, you know, the lifestyle is very, very frugal. Like we didn't have a lot of eating out things. We didn't have like shopping like every weekly or whatever. We were brought up in a very simple time also, I would say. All that translated later on when I grew up. I had the exposure, I went around in the world and saw how everything is. But thankfully for me, I was also working with NIFT for many years, where I worked with craft communities in Gujarat and like the village communities of Gujarat, studied and documented Panchmahal, Saputara tribes. And a lot of these regions are like really backward and not really a part of your everyday life, like you won't encounter that kind of lifestyle. But it's very intriguing, it's very absorbing, it's very like you know, you want to be there more because it's so it's really food for your soul. I was very drawn to it because it was literally like bringing me back to my roots, and it was something that really I felt nurtured, charged, channelized. And then when I started working with Wills and I traveled the world, I realized that there is so much that's happening in the world. But everywhere you go, you start looking for those unique characteristics of design that are only for a particular region. Like in Japan or in Tokyo, you would look for those smaller indigenous labels that are doing so many handcrafted things. Or for example, in London, you see a lot of punk and, you know, the underground fashion culture and things and stuff. I used to feel that, you know, the street clothing culture or the crafts of India or how we live or who we are or kind of the textiles that we wear on an everyday basis, it is so unique to us and yet not a part of fashion. So if there was a choice between being a designer making clothes and being a part of the fashion community and being a fashion designer, I would still probably choose to only make clothes because it comes very naturally to me. And I feel that I have enough content to go back and get charged to be able to do that thing all my life. Whereas fashion might just, I feel, I don't know, well, it's not that I've been a textile designer without being a fashion designer or vice versa. I've explored both of these simultaneously, but I still feel that when I'm working with the crafts of India, of various regions, and textile crafts of India, I just feel that it gives me so much more content, individualistic content and unique content that is so specially us, that is so specially Indian and unique to rest of the world, that I feel that's a special part of being who I am. Bringing in my family's lifestyle, the culture that I grew up in, traveling the world and realizing that this is our speciality, this is what the world needs today. And it comes so naturally to us. Like we have a mochi, we have a place where we can go and dance, there we have, hum roj ghar pe kapde dhote and things, you know, like all this is extremely, it's like being very, very sustainable in your lifestyle. I don't think there's a single household that doesn't have kapde ka thela.
Right.
You know, like it's, now we've started becoming conscious and we have started saying that, okay, let's start reusing our bags and let's have cloth bags to use for shopping. But we always had it in our households, isn't it?
So the fact that we're indigenously a sustainable society is
Yeah.
what you're trying to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
And we have a large number of arts and crafts across the country.
Yeah, yeah.
Having said that, the Eka is a brand that's made in India, yet launched internationally first and came to India much later.
Yeah.
Why is that?
You know, when I started, firstly, like I said, I never thought that I would be a part of the fashion community or I would be a fashion designer. I was just doing what I knew, like what I could do. And I was just making simple, timeless clothes in good textiles that would be in your wardrobe forever. I was quite evolved when I started my journey with my label in fashion. I wasn't young, I wasn't out of college, I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I was just trying to do what I was really passionate about and what I thought I would like to do for myself. Building a brand and doing something that comes so naturally to me was a part of my growing up culture and was around me. I felt that I was able to find an audience internationally more than I would find an audience in India, because here people kind of relate fashion, at that time at least when I started. I used to think that it was much more, the culture was more bling oriented or more ceremonial, festive. I didn't know that everyday clothes would be a part of the fashion in the years to come. Or I was closer home. That dialogue was already started closer home. I didn't realize that at that time. I just thought I'm one of the people who is looking for that kind of clothing. Maybe it's not everybody. But I feel that I was part of a lot of women who was actually evolved, was traveling a lot, who had seen the fashion scene of the world, who had bought and worn the high streets and realized it's not us. And you need to cross over quietly to the other side, but you don't want to lose your individuality. You're Indian after all. You've seen your mothers wear saris and kurtas and separates, but you've not, I've at least not seen my mother wear dresses and walk out really confidently and walk the streets, isn't it? So I thought that personally for me to be able to translate that Indian textile and clothing culture into a fashion that the world would be able to accept as a concept from India, I thought that dialogue was more relevant to the world outside than it was to India, not realizing that it was a necessity and it was a need to have that dialogue in India then. But I wouldn't say that there was a lot of time between me launching myself internationally and launching myself in India in retail. It happened quite soon, because by the time I'd started, the world had become like really small socially because of all the social media platforms that we have today. So that journey was, I would say that it was very quick and very swift, and yeah, but I did launch internationally first before I started in India. Yeah, that's true.
And how has the consumer changed in India? How is the consumer evolving today? Because of course from the first collection to now, there must have been a shift that you have witnessed.
I think, see, the good thing is that when I started, there was a need, as I said. There was a lot of women in India who was looking to wearing not a high street brand that came to sell in India from another country, but a brand that did not reveal the ethnicity of who you are and where you are from. I'm not saying this in any cultural context, but I just want to say that in Japan, you don't see the woman walking around the streets in kimono, whereas in India, a lot of women still wear saris. It might not be the most comfortable piece of clothing or drape, but yet we wear it because we don't belong to the Western clothing culture as well. So there is a need and a necessity to fill in the gap. Before you transcend to become somebody else for comfort, you have to bridge the gap by becoming something that comes really naturally to you because your body language, the clothes you wear, the climatic conditions you live in, the kind of textiles that are Indian, the kind of textiles that you've loved all your life because you've seen them in your mother's wardrobe, in your household or whatever, have been passed on to you from your mother. I think all that can only happen when you accept who we are and what comes to us so naturally. And then make it more contemporary, then make it more modern, make it more relative, more versatile in today's time. Like I would like to wear my own clothes and walk the streets of Paris where people would turn around and say, where did you get this from, you know? So I just feel really comfortable in my own clothes, and there are a lot of women who want to be exactly what I want to be. You know, it's a kind of like a think tank where people are changing, the mindsets are changing. And that change is happening very gradually across a community of people, across a whole sector of, like say, urban people living in certain kind of doing certain kind of professions, living certain kind of lifestyles, and you know, having the same kind of growth or whatever, like, you know. But I realized that because I started Eka when I did, I wanted it to be more meaningful and thoughtful in terms of what I was doing, and not really doing it for the sake of making a fashion statement. It really didn't bother me at all. I was not really caught up. I was not really conscious of the fact that whether or not I will be accepted. But the very fact that women were buying my clothes first, slightly more cautiously, because they felt that, you know, they're so roomy, they're so big, and they're kind of vague, you know, it's neither a kurta, it's neither a dress, what is it that, you know. And then gradually, I remember women buying it first, because I used to be there mostly when I would talk to the people who were buying my clothes, and I would say that, you know, this is how you should wear it, this is how you should wear a linen trouser, fold it up, wear it with your collapos, just be comfortable, yeah. And the next time they would come and they would say that you changed my personality. You gave me meaning, that I'd become so much of that kurta woman with churidar, and I was not that person. I was a girl who would wear denims and short t-shirts, and I suddenly was not that woman anymore. Then who am I? I can't really go in and buy a western whatever outfit, and neither I'm the person who would want to wear, you know, like your cultural, like a sari, for example, you know, for the rest of the days to work. So I'm glad that there was acceptability, I'm glad there was a reason, and I'm glad there was a need. And there was a consumer who was aware and open to experiment at the time when I was open and experimenting and investing and trying new things, and there were people who were wanting to buy those things. So
there's also a set of consumer who looks at these products with aspiration and yet feels they're expensive. Affordability is a very big question mark in this space where people want to elevate their style. Have access to sustainable and ethical clothing, but there's a gap between sustainability and affordability. What do you feel about that?
See, where in the world can you find a handmade cloth that can only cost you, say, 210 rupees a meter? Where else in the world? Nowhere but in India. Just because it's available to us, just because it is our next door weaver, does not mean that it's not laborious, does not mean it's a unique skill set, does not mean that it should be valued at a price that is not so obvious just because it's available and there's plenty. If I sometimes, you know, when I haggle with my viewers saying that, "Arey, hum 2 saal pehle we were buying at a certain price, now suddenly the price has gone up," I stop, I pause, and I think about it, that if I was making this fabric day in and day out, sitting on the loom, making 10 meters of that fabric with that kind of, you know, it's like, it's really laborious. It's very, very laborious. It's hard work. I would never sell it at that price. I would probably not make it, very honestly. So to be able to make the kind of clothes that at least people are finding aspirational, that people want to wear it, and it's only that the price is a constraint, but at least people want to wear it, I think it's half the battle won. I started it and I'm halfway there. Don't buy so many. Don't buy so many. Buy 3 or 4 that you would wear season after season. Buy 1 each season, buy 2 each season. Buy things that you would wear enough. I literally have to pass on my clothes to my friends and family. I can never throw them. There's never a reason to throw them. Never a reason to throw them. They're never out of fashion. They don't stop fitting me. They don't stop looking fashionable, trendy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they look worn out because they look familiar, that they look from day one, because I wash it twice before I send it out in the market. I want them to look a certain way. But the truth is that it can't be cheap. Sustainability can't be cheap. It can't be cheap. if I scale it up to a level where I say that it's only a barrier in the mindset of people where they feel that we cannot wear this. There is a barrier where they feel that this is not my everyday. Once we're able to cross that over, and if I'm able to make more of it, sell, right now I don't even have a single retail outlet, how can I sell it cheap? I have to pay a fair price. I have to be really conscious of what I'm supporting, where I'm going. Like I said earlier, all the weavers who work with us have worked with us for the last 15 years, 4 years before I started Eka. And I'm so proud of the fact that I've been able to sustain that whole community and family. Where I had 8 weavers in a village, today I have like 20 families who are working with us, which means almost a set of 80 people dependent on us. I think being able to sustain that wherever I get work from, whether it is crossing continents, going to other countries, because I feel we will get there, India is getting there. But in the meantime, I have to look for options for myself and my people. I can't make it cheap. I will not make it cheap. I will not make it affordable so that the person who's making 10 meters will start making 50 meters and be paid lesser than what he deserves to be paid. That's not the model that we want to pursue. Nobody should, I feel. Make it aspirational, make it good, make it valuable, make it something that people would like to cherish and buy it for what it deserves to be bought at, you know.
Right.
And not make more, not make cheap, not make it available every corner of the country. And it doesn't take away from the fact that somebody had sat on that loom for 24 hours to give you that 2 meters of fabric. It doesn't take away from the fact that it is a laborious process.
So while this is inherent to your brand, to your core philosophy, it is rooted in your core philosophy as a designer. In the world, globally now I speak, with designers, brands looking at switching to mindful fashion a lot more seriously and looking more deeply into their processes and their narrative. What are the challenges and the opportunities that you see for them?
But good thing is that there are challenges, which means that there are opportunities. I look at the opportunities actually first. Once I see that there is an opportunity in any context, be it about creating a certain kind of textile or exploring a certain kind of a textile with a different kind of set of weavers or people, I feel that you kind of willfully overcome the challenges that come along with the opportunities. So if I feel that if I'm able to work with the same set of weavers, create new things from the same skill sets, give it new, fresh outlook, you know, in terms of design, where the shops that are buying fashion across the world, where they're looking at sustainable brands and sustainable fashion, and they have already shortlisted, for example, Eka as a brand that they would like to stock, they should come back and buy again.
Right.
They should. So therefore, I have to keep one foot in fashion, and the other one in my craft sector and the villages and the textile crafts, because I feel that it's very Herculean to be able to balance both. I have to cross over and I have to make sense to the people who want to invest in me next season, because I'm so far away from them. They don't understand the technicality of how difficult it is to make a particular textile. It has to be aesthetically beautiful to them.
Reena, in fashion, scalability is a very big problem. Designers feel it's very difficult, and brands feel it's very difficult to scale this business.
Yeah.
For younger designers who are now aware of sustainability, are looking at mindful practices to create their brand,
Yeah.
what is a piece of advice that you'd like to give them?
I always like to say that, you know, just to be, being sustainable or being ethical or being mindful or thoughtful about what you're creating should not limit itself to not using and using technology. You cannot escape technology in today's world and time. Handloom or working with skilled artisans can only be long-term and sustainable and scalable on merit. You cannot do it out of goodwill. That's not enough, to be very honest. It has to be a business practice. So while I have a set of artisans who work with me on handloom, I have a set of weavers who work with me on powerloom. I do my sampling, my smaller bits of production on handloom, but wherever I feel I'm not getting the right price for the kind of amount of work that I'm putting in, of course it's custom made textiles on powerloom. It's natural textile still, it's sustainable textile still, but it is powerloom. I dye my yarns in the mill, does not make it not sustainable, because my business is such that I am crossing continents and countries to sell it. not everybody has the same kind of easy care option available as we do in India. And we are making a commodity that's everyday use. So it has to be easy maintenance, and that's what I say, that wash it with hand and dry it out of sun, that's about it. But when you're saying, when you want to make it easy for people to wear, buy, sell, consume, make it every day, not really make it just once in a lifetime kind of a wear or whatever, then I think you have to be conscious of the fact that it has to be both technology as well as skill sets of people that comes together to make it. So if I'm making a plain kapra, which gives me an advantage of making more, and then bringing in a craft like block print on top of it, where I'm supporting as I told you, I work with this artisan in Pethapur who we have supported for the last 12 years. We get all our blocks made through him. We're doing fabulous business with him. Like, in fact, his son wanted to join a factory because he was getting permanent employment there. I said, what do you need I want you to work for me, because they can employ anybody they want to tomorrow, but I will not find anybody who can make the block just the way you make it, because you've learned it from your father. So I want you here. I want you to stick around in the household and do work with your father. He said that I want to buy a bike and I want a satellite TV. We gave him some loan. I was like, yeah, go ahead and buy your bike, but stick around here. Now this is, again, sustaining a kind of a craft form and a skill set, right? So whether I'm block printing on a power loom cotton or if I'm block printing on a cotton that's not hand spun, does not take away the merit from it. It's still sustaining a craft form and a textile craft. It has to be understood. All these ideas, as much as they are ethical, as much as you want to be mindful about what you're putting out there, you have to understand that the business of it, the kind of livelihoods that you're supporting, the kind of business that you're giving back to them. I can't say that I want to live in an AC and you don't even have the option to have a cooler in your household. They want to buy a bike, they want their children to go to English schools. All this comes with money. So you grow, they grow, we all bring business together, but does not make my business unethical or not sustainable. Still, my pillars are where they are. The whole ideology of Eka is to make it meaningful. Buy it once, wear it all your lifetime. It still is natural, it still is biodegradable. I'm still using the best practices in terms of employing people, in terms of taking crafts of craft textiles of India to level 2, to a generation where they would still love to block print, because I'm hand holding that craft and I'm doing enough in many explorations and experiments in the craft to be able to make it more relative, contemporary, likable, for the younger generation to buy. I'm doing my bit, I'm not really restricting and thinking about whether I'm using technology or I'm not using technology. I'm sitting in this factory and I'm sitting in an industrial area. There are 1,020 things that I cannot do because it's not the norm. I cannot function from here. So it's fine. You have to survive. You have to find merit in your ideology and then positively promote it for your business.
An ecosystem.
Yes, totally, completely. It's a whole circle. It's not just one part of it. Not just one part of it, for sure.
Can circularity in fashion be achievable?
One should aim. 100% I don't think is possible, to be very, very honest with you. But one should aim for it. I think that the concept of buying, reusing, upcycling, recycling, buying vintage to make it the new statement. I think it all starts from thinking consciously about fashion, making fashion a part of your lifestyle and not something which just comes to shock you. It should be a part of your life as food is, it should be as meaningful as that, I'm saying, It should not just be something that should make you look good. It should be something that makes you feel good, so bringing in meaning into what you do with fashion is enough, I think.
So what are the exciting new things that we should look forward to from Eka?
Like I said, we are growing, we're expanding, and at the same time I want to keep the fact that I started the brand thinking that I want to do something that is going to be meaningful for my generation and generation next, which means evolve the brand to a level where I'm touching upon the areas where I haven't touched before, things that I haven't done in design before, which could mean clothing or outside of it, and yet keep my signature of meaningful design, thoughtful living intact, and try to make a difference in modern Indian design sentiment. keep traditional Indian textile crafts relevant, and scale up or down, whatever, I don't know, but yeah, expand to other areas that we haven't explored. Lots in the pipeline.
Thank you so much.
It was lovely talking to you. It was a wonderful
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Thank you for having me.